Icon Radio.
Hello and welcome to Deep Talk. I'm your host Neha, and I am so happy to be here with our guest for this week, Salim Rollins. Salim is on the show basically because he is a wonderful, wonderful person. He is an inspiration of how to be in this world. Salim is a yoga teacher and also a capoeira teacher, but many things besides, of course, as we all are. Deep Talk is a show about wisdom, tapping into the wisdom that we all have, telling our stories, sharing our stories, learning, thinking, reflecting, and healing. Salim, welcome on the show.
Thank you.
Maybe we can start by you maybe telling me a little bit about yourself. How would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? I'm a father.
Number one.
It's number one because I think that's probably my most important job right now. Make sure my kids are taken care of. I run a youth arts program in Capoeira called Capoeira Rising, and we'll get into it a bit later, but there are 3 pillar programs with that, as you mentioned: a Capoeira Angola program, a breakdance program called Slum Dance Africa, and a empowerment program for teen girls as well. So I run that program. I co-direct a yoga school called Synergy Yoga, and I've got some other, small business stuff going on back in my original country. I won't call it home country because Kenya's home now as well, but originally from the U.S.
All right. And Salim, if I take away all of that,
Sure.
If we take away all of that, and your relationships, your professional life, and your business life, your social life, even your economic life, if we take away all of that, who are you?
Who am I beneath or beyond that? I mean, if we're getting into it, then I can talk about myself as consciousness or awareness. I mean, if we're getting into it at that level, then words don't even do well to describe.
We got to try. We got to use words as pointers. So who are you?
Words are pointers.
So if you took it away, just in your own mind, who are you outside of all of that? Who are you?
Yeah, I think like all of us, being in this incarnation, in this world, figuring out why we're here, what we need to be doing while we're here, how to, a person, a human being who's interested in creating spaces for people to have meaningful experiences, creating spaces for me to connect with myself and my source at deeper levels than that initial description and initial layer of what it is we're doing, what it is I'm doing. I think all of that. Yeah.
Beautiful. So you're a consciousness on a journey.
I like that.
And your particular consciousness feels fulfilled when you create spaces for people to have experiences with their consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of my gift, personally.
Okay.
It comes very easily.
And if you had to choose 3 qualities that are the most important to you, what would they be?
The most important to me, or the most that I think that I embody?
I think the ones that you value the most.
The ones that I value the most. 3 qualities. Freedom. Peace. Fun.
Okay. And just for fun, which ones do you think you embody?
I think I embody all of them.
You see?
Actually.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's so
true.
funny.
Yeah.
Just a little insight on that, because I really feel sometimes we think we are aspiring to be something.
Yeah.
And then when we really break it down, we're already there.
Absolutely.
We're already who we aspire to be.
Yeah.
We just don't
like
realize
that.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, you asked that question.
Yeah.
So you can see the answer is you're already there.
Yes, I agree
You
with
know.
that too.
Perfect. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And maybe you can tell me a little bit about your life. Where did you grow up?
Sure. I grew up in a suburb of New York City called White Plains. More specifically, Greenburgh was the neighborhood. Sort of a suburban area that was really, there was a lot of community there. Like in other words, I knew my neighbors. later when I kind of moved to the city more, I didn't always know my neighbors so well. But where I grew up, I did, and I had a very
Like, what was the population roughly? It's like a big.
No, it wasn't large. I mean, that neighborhood, like most people had houses there.
Okay.
So that's one way to kind of paint the picture of it. It was this relatively green area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was constantly outdoors because my mom is a huge outdoor person and constantly had us. It didn't matter if it was raining or snowing or whatever. I put galoshes on if it's like raining out, but you go outside. So she was very, and continues to be very engaged with nature and always had me very active. My father too. And I would say in terms of my family life, it was a very rich upbringing, I think, culturally. And I grew up amongst a lot of artists, musicians, writers, creators. Greenberg, that area was sort of, in terms of, because the U.S. is, as you know, been entrenched in like these racial politics and racial identity for so long. But it was a pretty mixed area in terms of the people that were there. I'm African American, I identify that way, and so we had a lot of creatives, a lot of kind of creatives, people of color, and people who were Pan-Africanists, also activists, and people who were politically engaged, and like I said, creatives coming through the house constantly. So it was a very stimulating environment, in addition to me constantly being involved in a lot of kind of co-curricular and artistic and a lot of sports when I grew up as well. So I think I had a very happy upbringing.
Was it the kind of place where people, like kids, just play on the street together? And
they did, but we got into it too. Kids weren't always nice to each other.
Yeah.
We were also rough.
Yeah.
Like we would really go in on each other a lot. There were a lot of word battles. I was born in the 70s, but grew up in the 80s, and so like hip hop was, I kind of saw the emergence in a lot of ways of hip hop culture. But just, so yes, kids played a lot, but we were also like, we made fun of each other a lot too. Sometimes it got heated, but in general it was good-natured.
Yeah. All right. And so you look back at that as a very happy time.
Yes, definitely. I mean, trials as well, like everyone has, and, challenges with family members and this and that, but that's being human. Yeah, we all go through that. And
then how did you make your way out here?
So in 2006, I believe, I met a Kenyan woman, and I married her. Like a year and a half later. It was pretty quick. But we really fell in love. We really, kind of had a very strong connection and still do. We're no longer married, but we still maintain friendship and care, and we have 2 amazing children out of our relationship. So we met when I was living in Brooklyn in 2006. I used to promote a party called Manjinga. It was a great party. It was I'd say it was the best party in Brooklyn at that time. So, it was kind of Afrobeat, hip-hop, reggae, classic soul, and just the vibe there, though. We used to, for example, like, when midnight would hit, we'd come around, like the organizers, with trays of like fruit, and people would get fruit in the middle of the night. Wow. And just like, and we had, kind of a lot of classic films projected and some amazing DJs. Our first set of DJs were spinning vinyl back then, and really new music. So it was a special space, and I met her there. She came early to one of the parties, and because it was free before a certain time. So she was there before the cutoff, and I saw her, and I just kind of, it was one of those times where it kind of clicked, like, oh, like I recognize something in that person, and I want to talk to her. So we were dating, and then eventually got married. We came to Kenya in 2008 initially, and we thought we were going to stay here. We conceived our first daughter then, and made the decision to move back to the U.S., mostly for immigration status, so that Fatima's her name, so that she could get U.S. citizenship. She was on a green card, and we didn't want to compromise that, and also for the children as well, for them to be able to have a certain citizenship status in the U.S., which would be different if you're born overseas. So we kind of made the family decision to
move back after that.
Which was the right thing to do at that time. And then after 5 years, we moved to
Made
Kenya.
your way back here. All right, well, we'll be right back after this. Remember, you can catch us on iconradio.co.ke, and we are also Icon Radio KE on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll see you in a bit.
Icon Radio.
And we're back with Salim Rollins. Salim, I was just saying in the break, like where you grew up, and not only grew up, but then what you were doing early in your career or life. Is really something that's like a dream for many people, including myself, organizing parties, having that kind of, what is this? Let's look at this theme here. Freedom, peace, fun. Look at that theme that's playing out even in what you were doing back then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Serving fruit, like it feels like you've just lived this life in a completely different reality than most people do,
I guess. I'm not sure.
That's your reality. You were just born like a golden drop, and you just, you're just like in the ray of sunlight most of the time kind of thing.
Try and stay up full positive. Yes.
Yeah. And when you look back at those years or your childhood and things like that, like, do you feel like they've been really formative? And if so, what have they really founded in you? What is that foundational, what are those foundational principles?
It's interesting because my mom is in Kenya now. She lives in California. She just came a few days ago. And so I'm sort of with the foundation at the moment, which is great. And I look at her, she turns 83 in 2 weeks. And this woman she had a fractured femur last year. Like, she really had to go through recovery, and obviously your bones and your structure in your 80s is different than, other times. So but she just has been so graceful in terms of accepting what certain things that come in life and continuing to kind of move forward. And by the way, I live on like the 4th floor. Like, she's walking up 4, which for me is fine, but like, at 83 and recovery,
it's a lot.
but she's doing it. And so I think the foundation for me had a lot to do with, Mom was big. She's definitely born in 39, so kind of manners, behavior, like how you treat people, respect are really important things. I love when she comes around and reinforces a lot of this with my children, because it's not just me as well. It's like you can't say anything to grandma, like that's the, that's the bar, that's it. And fortunately, both my parents, my dad's a writer and also does other work. He's a diversity consultant as well. But both of them always encouraged me to find my own expression. Like, that's one thing that I'm really thankful for with my parents, is it wasn't like they expected. I was never told what I was really supposed to do in life, like a lot of people, get from their parents, or what they should do, which oftentimes comes down to what their parents might think are economically kind of viable or beneficial. So being that I did have creatives in the family, I think having a bit of space to figure things out myself was really helpful and important, and it's something that I definitely put a big value on in terms of how I raise my children. So I think that was there. I think probably a yearning or some experience with travel was there. My mom actually was a travel agent in the 1980s. So there was sort of that, that I think about sometimes. I'm like, it's interesting, your mom was a travel agent and you've ended up kind of, choosing to travel a lot in your life. But yeah, we didn't travel a lot. Well, we did travel a lot kind of domestically, and then we had a few trips internationally as well. But just that experience still of having a passport, of like seeing another place, of sort of being open to another culture, experiencing another culture or community or people or language, are some of the experiences that I had when I was younger that I think probably opened me up to, living in Kenya, to living in another country, because Americans are not known for adaptability or interest in knowing the world outside of the bubble that is America, right? Like, people don't speak multiple languages. I think the majority of the population there doesn't. and the majority of the rest of the world does. You know, so I think, but with that, even more important than travel, I think seeing other people and being accepting and learning and being open to learning and engaging, and you know, that sort of yearning or exploration of knowledge, even, and not in a closed space, but in a much broader space, was a really important principle.
And maybe we can go back to this thing about America and Kenya, because you know there's a love relationship, maybe a one-way love relationship, Kenya and America. I feel often, like when I look at Kenya, I do feel the desire for some kind of connection to Americanness very strong, and that's probably also because there's a large, you know, black population, let's say, somebody who looks like us but they're not us. And then, you know, there's a legacy of colonialism, which I really feel very, very much deeply ingrained in the psyche of people, including myself, which I have really been fortunate enough to be able to heal, hopefully mostly, almost all, I don't know. But how do you feel when you compare, broadly speaking, life? How would you do a comparison, or what would you speak to about these two places and these two peoples?
The first thing, actually, I'm going to rewind first to what you were saying about, like, a lot of Kenyans and you know, being sort of enamored with this pitch of the United States. I think the U.S. is a great salesman. You know, it like projects itself beautifully in movies and media and series. It's this glorious place, and the streets are all clean, yada yada. And then, you know, you get inside the U.S. and you see how kind of complicated and what a foundation of violence, you know, and murder is sort of beneath the surface there. I think America is a very complex place. There's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of originality. If you're talking about jazz music, if you're talking about hip hop, if you're talking about, you know, culture that's influenced the world, I think there's a lot that America has contributed, and a lot of beautiful expression. Also in resistance movements and activism has been very pioneering in a lot of ways, in terms of people standing up and asserting themselves and saying what's wrong and what needs to be changed. So to me, there's a tremendous amount of beauty. And still, as an African American person, I always will have a orientation in terms of how the country was established, you know, because we should first talk about genocide of First Nations people, and then we can, you know, start to talk about, you know, treatment of a lot of ethnic people who, you know, came from different places, who had to go through some big challenges, and this otherism that's always existed in the establishment of the United States, which is really tough. So it's a little, I think it's a complicated and interesting and curious country, and it's wonderful to be able to step outside of it and look at it, because when you're in it, it's you know, you can kind of feel like you're in a constant fight sometimes. You're always fighting for something, you know, always fighting for your rights, you know, and that can be tiring. So coming to Kenya, to me, was in a lot of ways an amazing break, and gave me space from kind of having to be in that sort of mindset and this hyper kind of racialized, let's you know, that's one aspect of the culture that exists in the U.S., where you kind of have to always see things this way or experience things this way, which is a challenge. So Kenya, to me, you know, the reason, I think that one of the major reasons that we decided to raise our children here, one, there was more family support from my ex-wife, who's Somali Kenyan. And so for the kids to also know that culture, because you know, I think American culture, you learn no matter where you are. It's global. Like, people kind of know about America, but America doesn't really know about the world. So, you know, so that limits. So if you're coming from the U.S., then a lot of youth, a lot of people are very limited in their knowledge about the world, you know, unless they've made an effort to travel and experience places. And then gone to places and gone beyond a hotel at that, you know, because you could still be living. Yeah,
you can still be in your same
right?
lifestyle in another country.
Continental breakfast, and, you know,
exactly.
Step out for an hour. So, so for me, this, I really wanted to, I felt like raising our children here offered them and me like a whole nother perspective on the world, and you know, if it's the language, because language is so reflective of your values and beliefs and your thoughts and intentions as a culture. And so the English language, then we have to kind of look at what were the values of the British themselves. Language reflects that, and as we know, a lot of it was kind of conquest and was about expansion and this sort of thing. And so I wanted them to be in a space, coming to Kenya and being raised in Africa where, one, they could see themselves reflected in everyone around them and the leadership and their teachers at school and this sort of thing, where there was more family support because we have a larger family here. It's just a larger, and the kind of importance and value of the family community here through their mom's family is really much more established. And I think having this perspective of understanding how to navigate through the U.S. and also knowing how to navigate through Kenya and having those two passports, to me, it's like a huge gift to them.
To be able to have those two experiences.
To understand this the cultural literacy of two places is opens
and
up
of course
a lot
the
more
historical, like the history and the legacy of the history.
Yes.
And how that plays out for
Yes.
them. Well, I mean, I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy to be... I mean, there's both places have dark historical legacy.
Yes.
Both
Absolutely.
places.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, this is the world we live in at the end of the day. And so, but I think the value, it's sort of like the currency and the value of being able to like I said, cultural value of knowing two places in this time is of huge, huge value. It's a huge gift, I think, that they have.
Well, we'll leave it there for now. We'll come back right after this.
Icon Radio.
So, Salim, now I'd like to, in our conversations, every time we're on Deep Talk, we're talking a little bit differently. But today I really, really want to ask you, because this is something that I really, when I talk about you to people, when I talk to you about a few people, then something that really comes up is, for me, you really epitomize, somehow, is it epitomize, or you're really representing and presenting what I call divine masculinity. And, because you're physically strong, you're athletic, you have that, when I'm next to you, I do feel, okay, I'm safe. So there's that masculine kind of idea that, okay, I'm safe because there's a protective figure, but it's very different. I mean, I would really love you to talk to me about your thoughts, your feelings, and also your own journey with masculinity, and if it involves also, of course, femininity,
Yeah, I think it, to me, has to involve femininity. I think it has to balance. I think that it's really important to understand that when we talk about masculinity, femininity, we're born with gender, right? So to me, that's a fact of our reality. I know there's a lot of kind of debate, discussion, reinvestigating, and I think that's good. But to me, also, gender is a fact. Polarity is a fact.
Fact, yeah.
In sort of the natural order of things. How that's expressed is this is the interesting thing about humans, is that we kind of have a lot of space to express ourselves in different ways. And I think that's a beautiful thing about being human. I think it's important at this time that we're at, for men in particular, to really look at what we've been taught and what we've learned about who we are, what we're supposed to do, and how we're supposed to be. Because I think a lot of it has been well off the mark. And that can be reflected in, when we talk about, like, even this term, I don't use it that often, but I understand it, of hypermasculinity. I think the idea of showing masculinity as aggression, right? I mean, to me, the sort of epitome of that is war, or, intense violence, which is perpetuated by men primarily. So we can look at a lot of the violence that exists in the world as a result of how men have sort of misunderstood themselves. And so I continue to challenge myself to look at what I've learned, like with that in mind, because I know I've absorbed, like we've all absorbed, a lot of these notions and ideas that are misplaced. So to really look at that. And I think a part of that investigation involves looking also at the feminine qualities within us as men and embracing them. For example, I think caretaking tends to be a feminine quality because a woman takes care of a child 9 months before the child comes out. It's intuitively a part of how woman was created, to actually bear a child and be a caretaker, and then the child's nursing for another X amount of time, if that's what the mother's doing. So, but those are qualities that we can cultivate, and I think that as men that we have in us. And so I do think of myself as a caretaker. I'm very physical and affectionate with my children, and I think the work that I do is also oriented around that, around creating spaces where people can kind of have different experiences with each other, and hopefully where also men can experience themselves differently, whether that's through capoeira, whether that's through yoga practice, whether that's through, even just conversations, and where women can also experience themselves and men in different ways.
Yeah, and actually my next question was going to be, how has this journey, and you're a man,
Yes.
Biologically you're a man, and there's a connection there with your energy, let's say, and for me, gender is energy.
Yeah.
And I think, personally, we're on a spectrum. All of us fall on a spectrum in terms of our energies. Our energies may not just be completely, aligned with our physicality, right? But how has this, because I really feel that's so important, that this journey of a man, how has yoga and capoeira really influenced that journey for you? What have you gained from doing that? And how, first of all, maybe you can start by telling us how long you've practiced.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I like that question. There's some immediate, easy things that come to mind. But to your last question, capoeira, I started in 95. What's the math there? Is that 27 years now? 27 years. Yeah.
God, oh my God. I was thinking, no, it's like 7 years, but I'm 20 years mentally behind. Oh my God.
Yeah. 27, it took me a minute too. Yeah. 22 years.
Okay.
Easily, because it was 2000 and we're in 2020.
And so how old were you at that? That was 1995. You were like
19.
18, 19?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I was first year in uni. I started,
Capoeira. And a few years later, yoga.
Yeah. And in terms of how sort of I've experienced, I think you're asking about how I've experienced masculinity, or like how that's helped me understand maybe like what, or helped guide me, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I would say with capoeira in particular, there was for me a brotherhood that came in the community and communities that I was practicing capoeira in, that was a different way of being with male peers and friends. We're singing together, we're playing instruments together, we're holding a circle, we're doing call and response songs. I mean, I didn't grow up in the church, I didn't really grow up in spaces where like singing was, I grew up around musicians, but not where like singing was a part of like my cultural fabric, So capoeira brought, and then furthermore, it's, an African-based martial art form. So there was that quality, which to me at that time represented sort of the initiation experience that I think is really helpful and important for a lot of youth, and
for young men in particular, or?
I think for both, but I think to what we were saying before in terms of men having some particular kind of conceptions and ideas that have been misaligned, I think particularly for men, it's helpful to have sort of guideposts. And there are a lot of men who don't have, strong male figures in their lives who really are, helping them, understand themselves in a positive way, unfortunately, in my experience. I think things are changing, and but to me, sort of that brotherhood, and then this. I mean, there's so much in capoeira. The reverence for kind of the elders and the lineages you find in martial arts throughout, also in yoga as well. Any kind of space or that has discipleship, that has mentorship, and has that kind of deep study. So for me, my maestre or teacher now is just turned 89 years old a few days ago. and he's still around. He's from the south of Brazil, but came to New York in 1990. And so that relationship with another father figure, even though my father was very present and I think was a wonderful father, but having that within a particular craft and art, and like
a mentor.
Study. Yes, yeah, and a real teacher. So there was kind of that aspect. But that brotherhood in particular was really important for me because, we got people in capoeira groups tend to get very tight, and so, it's a certain art form where it's, if you're there long enough, there are expectations, like any martial art, you're kind of expected to kind of to maintain certain things in the group or keep, to start participating at different levels if you're there over time, and that's, if the group is supportive and positive, and not all are, like any space, then that's oftentimes an honor and something that you want to do, sort of a responsibility, in a way in which the art form continues to be transmitted. My first yoga teacher, John Tamayo, that was at a yoga studio in Soho in New York, and he was another really amazing man who I think embodied a lot of balance in terms of who he was as a person and who he is, in terms of not having this kind of hyper masculine expression, but was just his knowledge of both philosophy of yoga, history, the way he could read people as well, the way he could really see what's going on with people based on how they move through the world and their bodies in particular, to me was really amazing. And then how he communicated with his students and how he held space, to me, represented a lot of balance of how he expressed his masculinity, and was he was just an amazing mentor. And I continued to find other great mentor teachers, both in India and, other places as well.
Yeah, so it's what you're really saying to me is really making me think, because the traditions, they play a very important part in forming a man. And I really feel they're obviously being lost. And not that all the traditions are healthy or necessarily right for today's world. Correct. Let's say that. Right. Let's not say unhealthy, but let's say they're not necessarily the right thing for some are maybe. Yeah. Some are unhealthy. But I really feel for me, my heart goes out to men, because I really feel there's so much work happening for women. And there's so much consciousness focused on women's emancipation, liberation, empowerment, etc., etc. And I do feel that the men, everybody is a victim of today's of the way the world is in a negative way. Everybody's of it, and especially men. And so they haven't had that. And so it's really interesting to me to see that how these kind of traditions and heritage have played such an important role for you in becoming, an empowered, a gentle, a kind, a strong, a skilled, an ambitious, but easy and fun person, which is a man, and to have all those qualities within a man and be completely at ease and being authentic, in yourself.
Traditions, and part of that is kind of some of the discipline that comes with it.
Okay, yes, of course, the discipline.
The discipline, and that's not always for me now. It's not, it's like the self-regulating discipline, right? It's like how, because, I like this idea that, we're not, I think one of the shortcomings of a lot of what we identify as global culture, which is largely like European-based culture, is this competitiveness, And I'm at this point of my life, I'm not interested in. I need to compete with myself. That's it. I need to become a better Salim, or improve, or expand, or evolve. Evolve's a better word. From where I was, I don't want to be going backwards. So let me regulate. Let me be disciplined within my own choices, and let me maintain my own practice now. Of course, in order to get more towards that space, there is kind of a period in life where you need to maybe be with a teacher or with a community where you're practicing discipline at some level. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's always been through a lot of these movement arts. It's been yoga and capoeira.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you. We're going to come right back after this break.
Icon Radio.
And welcome back to Deep Talk. Salim, I'm enjoying the conversation so much. I want to move to yoga now, because we spent a bit of time on capoeira last time. And I wanted to ask you about, first off, what has yoga really done for you in your life?
So I came to yoga, I have to go back to Capoeira first, from injuries. Well, that's not true. I came to yoga in high school, being drawn towards some of the information. I think Swami Muktananda was like the first book I read. I can't remember the title right now. But that really kind of gave me, I was exploring a lot of Eastern philosophy in high school. I was experimenting with fasting and this sort of thing. So yoga came to me then, but I wasn't practicing. And so then after a few years of practicing Capoeira Angola, it can be tough on the body. So I had a couple of injuries. And I knew yoga would be a good practice for me to balance out. And so initially it was something that I wanted to use to balance out my capoeira practice. And I'd say as soon as so the first yoga experience I had would have been with a friend of mine from primary school. I was probably not over 13, I was probably about 12 years old, and his father practiced. And I actually remember seeing his dad practice whenever I'd go to his home, like 10, 11, 12 years old. So he'd just be there practicing. You knew to kind of be quiet when you're in the living room and he was practicing. And he had a really beautiful practice. And so that's the first time I really saw someone like consistently practicing. Like he practiced daily. And interestingly, I got back in touch with him like a year ago. He reached out to me, just observing my work over the years. And we had a nice connection. And he may come to Kenya sometime.
Oh,
he's asking advice on a safari. So then fast forward to the year 2000, I had moved back to New York from California, and I was like, okay, I love capoeira, I want to keep doing it forever, but I'm not going to be able to if I don't have something to balance out the practice, because it's tough on my body, at least the way I was training then. And so I came to yoga, and I asked friends who I knew practiced about a studio. They referred me to Atmananda Yoga in New York. I met John Tamayo there, who is the founder of that studio and a teacher. And I just really loved his class so much, I really didn't go looking elsewhere at that time. Later on I did. And I practiced with him, and as soon as I started practicing, I would start practicing at home. So to me, it was like home practice was always a part of my practice. I mean, I wanted to, just kind of keep doing it. And again, like with this mission of being able to, make changes in my body so that I could maintain my capoeira practice, I wanted to keep doing it outside the studio. And I did. And so I learned his sequence, pretty quickly, because I was practicing all the time at home. And he had his own kind of sequence, this Atmananda sequence. And then, maybe about 6 years after I started with him, I bumped into him. This was after I had since gone to India. I traveled from Kerala to Rishikesh in 2005 by train and bus, stopping at numerous cities, Mysore, Pune, Varanasi, Alora Janta, a bunch of places. And I was filming. I used to work in video production. And so I was filming yogis and sadhus and scholars about yoga philosophy, about the Yoga Sutras specifically, and Patanjali. And so that was like great research for me. And soon after I came back from India, I bumped into John. I don't think I was really taking that many classes with him at that point. I was still going occasionally, but not as much as I had before. And he asked me to, this is the kind of person he is, he asked me to just come do some filming. If I'd just do some filming, for him, he had to do some promo videos or something. And as I said, I was working in video. And in exchange, he'd give me a yoga teacher training. Like, I could come attend, which is, like Yoga Alliance certified thing, 200 hour. But it's kind of the basic entry-level training that people do to become a yoga instructor. I wasn't thinking about becoming a yoga teacher.
Nobody ever is who does that. Everybody's
right?
like, most of them,
all the time.
Like 60 to 80% of students who take teacher trainings,
yeah,
they don't want to be teachers.
Yeah,
and 60 to 80% of them end up becoming teachers.
It's crazy. And I was already a teacher. I wasn't a yoga teacher. I may have even taught some yoga to kids in school. I did a lot of youth work. I've been working with youth for a long time. So I was teaching after school programs, mostly capoeira though, and a little video production. And I might have done one yoga class with youth in New York City public schools. So anyway, John gifted me essentially. Me and my friend Josh filmed for like 3 hours one day, and John gave me this, $4,000, $5,000 yoga teacher thing value. The value of that's gone much further because it really kind of, helped me along this path of co-directing a yoga school now and doing the work that I'm doing now, which is mostly retreats. We do Thai massage certifications and yoga teacher trainings. So that was it. So John gifted me with this, and I think that going through the experience of doing the YTT and going through so much transformation in those 3 weeks, I was like, wow,
what kind of transformation?
I can start with the physical transformation. I mean, I had never practiced that much. If I was practicing maybe 4 or 5 hours of asana a day, probably a good 4 hours of asana, then we'd have philosophy and history as well. I remember feeling like I would walk out into New York City, into Manhattan, and I just felt like I could jump up to one of these skyscrapers, on top. I remember distinctly having that feeling, like my body was so open. So just the blockages, and especially living in New York where there's just so much energy all the time, and you need to kind of be aware and be on guard a bit, so the body kind of, certain things develop in the body. And I just remember having a huge release and just feeling so open and loose, and just feeling no stress in my physical body at all, just completely loose, which I had never felt in that way before, in all the kind of different practices that I did. The training was after India, so probably when I was in India I had some of that too, but I was moving around a lot, so it wasn't as focused as a program.
As the teacher training.
As the teacher training, yeah. But I certainly had that experience with different teachers, and definitely had teachers who were able to help unlock things inside of me, even through discussion, not even asana.
Yes, exactly, just through dialogue.
Through dialogue, absolutely, especially since I was interviewing people, and really,
and then you're like, oh my God, and that opens something in you, right?
Completely.
And so beyond the physical,
yeah.
How did it because you talked about starting with the physical, but
so much. I mean, now we can get into pranayama and awareness of breath and breathing. I mean, I remember days when I was practicing, where I was counting my breath for half the day. I was really aligned and in tune with my breathing, and just really and that, the value of that to me was kind of, especially in New York City, was kind of cutting out all that extra thought. So it was really the mental practice of being in tune with my breathing. And especially coming out of India, I think when I was there speaking to a lot of the folks who I interacted with, understanding in an embodied way the principles of equanimity and being able to using certain practices to be able to not hold on to things. So if certain energies, for example, are coming to you or at you somehow, not letting them get stuck in your body, but
just allowing them to go through you,
allowing them to go through and not holding on to everything.
So just to explain, it's just kind of so let's say somebody's shouting at you.
Exactly.
You'll also have an emotion in you. Not only will you absorb their emotion, but you'll also have a reaction in you.
Yes.
And you can just, if you're open, you can they just pass and they're gone and they're not there in your body anymore.
And it's ego work at the end of the day, because you're not personalizing something that comes at you. It's not about, that's not about me. That's in them. It doesn't have to be in me. It's in me if I kind of hold on to it or I absorb it. So learning those skills of, to me it's detachment, not being attached to certain things, even energies that come at you. Equanimity, not getting too, understanding when times are great, enjoy it, but not be attached, because it's not permanent, right? When things are low, also not being stuck there, not being, attached to, challenging times, because things are inevitably going to change. So kind of finding that middle path to me is a teaching that I definitely continue to use as a guiding light.
Wow, I really want to go into this, but we are going to break for a little, and we'll be right back.
Icon Radio.
So we're back with Salim Rollins, Deep Talk, and I am Neha. So Salim, just looking at your journey, it's very beautiful. Even the little tastes we've had of it, starting with the arts, the creativity, the freedom, the expressiveness in your childhood, moving into becoming a man, and how Capoeira really was such a foundational training for becoming a man that is true to himself, not a man that has been programmed of what he's supposed to be. And then how yoga has now, it's like there's this opening that's happened to you, you know, with yoga. Like yoga really opened you up to living what I call like living spiritually. You know, because what is living spiritually to me? It's like now living in living the principles of spirituality that we're taught. Principles like balance, principles like non-attachment, principles of like, you know, the inner processing, right? And what you also experienced of this even through the body, because of course the body is a part of us and it's an integral part of our individuality on this planet and our incarnation on this planet. And how yoga really took you to experiencing states that were almost out of body experiences in your body. You know, so that's really beautiful, and it brings us to maybe, you know, the part that I want to explore next with you, which is spirituality, which is God. And, you know, what has your experience been with God, and how have you experienced that in your life?
Well, I think if we come back to the arts that you've been talking about, that those are, you know, some of the most, you know, connected spiritual experiences for me. Personally, I tend not to use the term God. You know, I don't know that I have divine consciousness, you know, perhaps, but in a sense it doesn't matter. And God for me, just because I think it tends to be so loaded, and a lot of, to me, sort of associations with, you know,
so
like
whatever
almost who that is.
So what is the word that you like to use, or the words that you like to use?
I don't know that it you know, I'm at a point now where it's sort of like I'm more interested in experiencing, than, you know, labeling. So it's not, so it doesn't bother me, but maybe there's a little.
There's still a little bit there,
There's a little, right. And because, of course, religious, you know,
we've been taught that God is a dude in the sky.
Yeah, and heaven, you know, I mean, we talk about, you know, like, you know, this is one of the things I've been listening to recently, Sadhguru, and like, you know, he says something funny. He's like, okay, if this conception of heaven, he says, if there's a place that's better than this, why don't you just go there? You know, like, take care of it right now.
Exactly. That's true.
He's not encouraging people to commit suicide, but he's like, if you really believe there's a better place, right? Yeah. And I like that. You know, I like the idea that this is it. Like, we're there. Wherever there is, that's where we are. And wherever there is, that's also what we've created. Like, that's what I'm concerned with. Like, what the experience that I'm creating for myself and the people around me, right? Because this is all I know. I mean, this is it. And it's a little bit pragmatic, but I think that's important. I think that's important because sometimes when we talk in terms of spirituality, it can be something that's lofty and also very far, well, I would say somewhat removed from our kind of tangible experience, you know, but yet we're having a very tangible experience, right? And so to me, this is why, like, to me, the body is a great way to start to, like, to move into creating different experiences for ourselves. So for example, you know, let's say, okay, let's look at Capoeira. The primary instrument we use is called a berimbau. And in a lot of the continent of Africa, the berimbau is used as a healing instrument, used by healers who may be calling on ancestral energies and this sort of thing, but they're doing like healing on people. Now that instrument's been kind of carried through the African diaspora experience and finds itself in the context of this, you know, martial art. And by the way, most African martial arts are also very much based in using ancestral energy. In other words, you may, like if we look at Senegalese wrestling, for example, before they go do the wrestling, they're going out to like the forest into the family shrines and doing like their prayers and giving offerings to the ancestors. And so it's not separate from spirituality in India as well, like Kaladi Prayatu, like they have, or in Muay Thai, there's like a shrine there, you know, so it's all sort of connected. And even your efficacy as a fighter comes from how connected you are to spirit.
But even in music,
of course,
there's always an invocation in India, at least in India, there's always invocation before you start, or even dance.
Yes.
In classical dance, there's always the prayer before the dance, right?
Exactly. So to me, it's not. So that being said, spirituality has to be connected to like what I'm doing. It has to be sort of a little bit tangible and a bit connected, and not. And I don't say that to say that they're not experiences that people have, or even experiences that I've had that are not, that I can't explain. Yes, I've had experiences.
For example?
A lot of people have had experiences.
For example?
Can I tell you everything?
You can tell me one.
I would say that there are definitely more than one time when I felt energies like inside my body, that I couldn't explain what they are. There have been times when I've seen things that are not in the realm of like what we would normally see.
Did it scare you?
No, maybe more curious, because I was always interested. I mean, I'd say in terms of my spiritual journey, since that was your question, I'd say, so a lot of Eastern philosophy. I also was like exploring a lot of kind of like philosophy of Rasta in high school. And then coming back to like a lot of African-based spirituality in university, specifically we could talk about Ifa. Like I went to Cuba and I worked on a film, and the film was based, so my friend who is the director had been initiated in Lukumi or Ifa, the Yoruba-based spirituality in Cuba. And so when we went right to the house of like his godparents who were priests. So I'm like literally sleeping in the shrine. Like there's one room that's dedicated to the Orisha, another room that's the Palo Monte stuff that's more Congo based, and then another room that's like Spiritismo stuff. Like Cuba's very mixed up like that. So in my godparents' house, it's a temple, there are like these three different sort of practices, and each room has its own, they're kept separately, but it has its own rituals with it. But primarily ancestral-based spiritual practices. And so that was a big influence on sort of early orientation for me, and certainly something I still carry with me. And so I was able to spend a good amount of time with them. I went through certain initiations with them in Lukumi, received what we call our warriors, which are some of the Orisha, and I think that was important because, in a lot of cases, in a lot of the world, and certainly in the U.S., and a lot of African American communities, people kind of look down on this, or it's thought of as, like the antithesis of sort of like Christian, values, which is sort of a universal, or at least in the U.S., is like a kind of common
also here
language, of course, in Kenya as well. And so this sort of, this sort of shunning of traditional practices, to me, is very problematic. I have a big issue with that.
Yes.
Because I think there's so much healing.
And so funny, as you're speaking, I'm aware of what people who might be listening may be thinking.
Good, let them hear.
Yeah.
Good, let them hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them hear. We're so easy to take on someone else's religion, and people are taking on the religion of someone who came and was
conquered people.
Genocide. Yeah. It's like the cross in one hand. And furthermore, I'm going to say it. Even today, I was looking at a Buddha guy, and I see like this, this Italian-looking Jesus on the front of his Buddha, and it's just like, oh man, I can't get with it. I don't like it, especially not here in Africa. Like, it's just like you're worshiping, someone who's, at one point either oppressed or colonized you. That's your image of like who God is. And furthermore, why are we, putting God in a human body or a man's body so to me it's, so yes, I do push back against a lot of the way that, I have no problem with Christianity, but if you're going to talk to me about Christianity and I'm going to be able to have like a real, I think that there's so much beauty and value in, that's there, but the way it's carried out in
yes,
practice
of course,
is
like
misaligned.
many religions, yes,
like
most religions,
yes,
yeah,
like most religions, we can say that.
Yeah,
we can say that. So I think it's and furthermore, most of the prophets were, highly encouraging exploration. Like, figure it out for yourself. But, most people are just kind of following what they're told.
What is interesting to me is that what you're really saying for you, spirituality is lived,
Yes.
and is experienced in your body and in everyday life and
Yes.
in everything you do, especially, and I think you started with talking about the arts, especially through the arts.
Yeah.
And through martial arts and other practices like yoga and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very African.
Yeah.
That's very African. That's a very that's African spirituality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's experienced. It's visceral.
Mm-hmm.
It's not theory. You have to feel it in your body. That's why in a lot of the continent, the way you express your spirituality, like you said, is dance and music. That's the way it's expressed. It's not by sitting down, listening to someone lecture for 2 hours.
And we're going to, on that note, start with that after we come back.
Icon Radio.
Welcome back to Deep Talk. We're with Salim. I have asked Salim if he would bless us with some capoeira music. And having said that, we have not actually told anybody what capoeira is and what capoeira music is. So maybe if you want to share a little bit more, Salim.
Sure. So I practice what's considered the traditional form of capoeira, or more African-based form of capoeira called Capoeira Angola. And capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian martial art that was established by primarily the Angolans and the Congolese enslaved Africans who were brought to Brazil. So of course they couldn't bring possessions with them as enslaved people, but they could bring their culture and their art and their language with them, and their martial traditions as well. And so capoeira was sort of a hybrid of what these Angolans did mixed with other Africans, Senegambians that were brought to Brazil to work as forced labor. And so we call it a sort of art form or a martial art of resistance. It's sort of a cultural resistance because it was, the history of it. One of the things that happened in Brazil is that many enslaved Africans escaped to the hills to establish independent communities called quilombos. This happened throughout the African diaspora, in certain countries more than others. But in Brazil, there's still quilombos that exist to this day that were established, hundreds of years ago. And so we, although we don't know the specifics of, were they using capoeira as their martial form, they would have been using the martial forms that they knew. And those are the martial forms that also influence capoeira. So there's a lot of the history of capoeira goes
let me ask you a very basic question.
Sure.
Is the martial arts used in fighting, in self-defense? Is it actually used? Or is it more of a discipline and art form?
So the history of capoeira goes in a lot of different directions. So there was a time historically when capoeiristas, what we call, those are capoeira practitioners of capoeira, were using the martial form of the art. And there are a lot of, there were even weapons that were unique to capoeira that were used,
And they used it in resistance.
As well, but also in the street as well. There's a lot of different sort of ways in which it's expressed itself. There's the Malandro character, who's kind of a street smart hustler, who would have used capoeira, and kept a razor blade on him or between the fingers or in the mouth. They used to wear even silk scarves back in the day. And yes, it was a fashion thing, but it was also to protect the neck. In the countryside, there are stories of, I did a documentary called Besouro Preto, Black Beetle, on a capoeira master who lived in the early part of the 20th century named Besouro, who was known to stand up for the oppressed Afro-Brazilians in the countryside of Bahia, it's a state in Brazil, against the landowners and the police. And he was very famous. He's a historic figure, but also a kind of folk figure in capoeira. But what we do know is that he stood up for the rights of people. And so these are the sort of representatives of capoeira that we really value in terms of what's important in the history of capoeira and what capoeira represents. It's a living resistance to oppression, because that's one of the ways in which people had to express themselves. Now, being an African martial art, you don't just move willy-nilly.
Yeah.
You move to music. So everything's rhythmic. And you see this in the way that African people throughout the world express themselves. If it's Muhammad Ali, for example, his efficacy as a boxer is in his ability to dance. It's in his elusiveness. This is Capoeira. This is some of the principle and idea. So we're using a lot of elusiveness. With attacks, we don't block. We find kind of a way out. We soften, it's practiced low to the ground. And it's practiced in a circle. And I would say Capoeira, the circle of Capoeira is called the roda, and it's a ritual space where you have percussive instrumentation, call and response songs, and then two practitioners, what we call playing. So the incarnation today of Capoeira, we don't need to be rolling around with blades in our, we can keep it sort of in our blood. We still have the use of the martial application, but it's also play. It's also playful. So there's a softness to the art form where we don't, in terms of how we practice today, we're not trying to cut each other down. We're actually trying to build in the roda. That doesn't mean someone doesn't give you a sweep or a headbutt, but you're not going to want to hurt somebody in the process. And if you're skillful, you'll know how to sweep people and how to give a headbutt without hurting them. And it's fun. You should, when you receive something, an attack, you should be able to either escape, or if someone gets you, then the idea is that you kind of get up, you walk around the circle together, and then you get back into it, and you have a chance to kind of get them back. Yeah. And so there's this space for that kind of challenge and fight and martial aspect, but in a way that where you're building with each other and not cutting each other down. And this is the evolution of Capoeira. So what was at once something that was violent out of necessity evolved over time to be something that was kind of still has that inside of it, but doesn't need to express itself that way now.
All right, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So you're going to play something for us?
Yeah, I'll play music. So as I said, the music is a central part of the art form, and the music, the songs, are what we call corridos in Capoeira, talk about old masters of the art. They talk about, they'll share stories. They should always reflect what's happening in the circle. They'll give guidance to the two players inside the circle, or they might mock somebody if they're, for example, acting childish. There's a song for that where you're kind of making fun or highlighting the fact that they're, whining. So there's humor, there's play, there's theatrics in Capoeira, and the music reflects all of that.
All
so
right, beautiful.
I'll sing a couple songs, yeah?
Okay.
And I have this drum that happened to be here in the studio, so good job. Good
Perfect,
job, Icon.
Yeah.
Good job, Icon.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's Capoeira music. With a drum. So
with
we have
drum,
other instruments.
of course.
Come to Kiprop, check us out when you want to hear the full bateria. That's the percussive orchestra.
Yeah. Can you let people know how they can get in touch with you, and also if they want to come and try some Capoeira?
Sure, yeah. I mean, easiest probably is IG. It's just Salim_Rollins. And you could send me a message.
And Rollins is
Rollins, Salim, Salim. And just send me a message. And if anyone's in the Nairobi area, you're welcome. We have programs. Capoeira is Tuesday, Thursdays, 5 to 7. And then breakdance Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we have a teen girls program as well, where we're connecting the girls with professional women and doing other things. So that's something else that if there are any women professionals who want to either be involved in internships or even offer a workshop, could reach out to me.
Yes. Right here?
Yes.
I'll offer a workshop for you girls.
We'll continue the combo.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Salim, we always offer a reading on the show.
Yes.
And I think you've chosen tarot today.
I've chosen tarot.
Because you're inspired by Osho.
And the Osho tarot.
And the Osho tarot. So maybe you want to put all, whatever energy, whatever things are on your mind into the cards. Shuffle the cards.
Let's go.
And then we'll do, you can pick, how many cards do you want to pick?
3.
3? All right, we're going to do 3. Are you done? You want to spread them out?
Yes.
And then you use your non-dominant hand.
Good. Already doing that.
Hover over. Yeah, hover over wherever draws you.
Yep.
You just go for it.
Okay.
All right, first card. Let's look at this. Fighting.
See?
Let's look at this one. Healing. Beautiful.
Great.
And last
This
one.
is like a recap of our conversation.
You see? Oh, we got isolate. These cards are coming up a lot. Isolation.
Really? Interesting.
All right. It's interesting, but let me just maybe, before we read, let's
Sure.
see. Fighting is usually a card that is coming from resisting something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Healing, of course, is a beautiful card.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the fighting leads to healing.
Yep.
You know,
Like
because you have
Capoeira.
to struggle. You have to struggle with something
Yeah.
before you can it can become conscious, and then it can heal. And the isolation card it's come up a lot with people, actually, interestingly, and it's really about how we often this is bringing me back to the car.
Yeah.
The conversation in the car
Yeah,
we
we
had.
talked on route here. Sure.
That we often like keep ourselves away, and it is emotion that really melts isolation. Okay,
Yeah.
these are the tears of. I don't know if you want to see these.
They're beautiful cards, by the way.
Yeah, they're beautiful,
Like
aren't
the
they? Kevin, do
artwork.
you need to see these, or is it okay right here? You're fine. All right. So I don't know. Would you like me to read these for you?
Sure.
I will read. I selectively read because sometimes I find that
Yeah, there's something in the content.
that I don't want to.
Yeah.
That doesn't. It's not appropriate, or it's not written in a way that I like. Here we go. One moment it was there, another moment it is gone. One moment we are here, another moment we have gone. And for each moment, how much fuss we make, just for a moment. The figure in this card is completely covered in armor. If you look closely at the armor, you can see it's covered with buttons that can burst. Okay? By covering our wounds with armor, we are preventing them from being healed. Interesting. So it's calling for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talking. So we prevent ourselves from the healing when we close ourselves off. As you know, this is baby talk for you. So I don't know what this is
That's
about
good.
for you, but
Yeah.
do you feel it's if it feels relevant to you in whatever area in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course healing. You carry your wound. With the ego, your whole being is a wound, and you carry it around. Nobody is trying to hurt you. Everybody's busy safeguarding their own wound. But still, we're so worried about being hurt. You cannot touch a man of Tao. Why? Because there is no one to be touched. There is no wound. He is whole. The word whole is beautiful, and the word heal comes from the word whole. And holy also comes from the word whole. Be aware of your wound. Be aware of your wound. And that awareness will bring it to the surface to be healed. Okay? Move as a total being and accept everything. And you will feel an energy flowing in you have not felt before. It is time when the deeply buried wounds are coming to the surface and are ready and available to be healed. The figure in this card is naked, vulnerable, and open to love. The aura around his body is full of light, and the quality of relaxation is dissolving his struggle and suffering. Lotuses of light appear on his physical body around the subtle energy bodies that healers say surround each of us. In each of these layers appears a healing crystal or a pattern. When we are under the healing influence of the King of Water, we are no longer hiding from ourselves or others. In this attitude of openness and acceptance, we can be healed and help others to also be healed and whole. Okay? Isolation. we are miserable when we are too much in the self. And I think here he means the self in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say in the personality.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Either you can be in existence or you can be in the personality or the persona. Both are not possible together. Okay, to be in the persona means to become an island. To be in the persona means to draw a boundary line around you and to make a distinction between this I am and this I am not. When you are flowing, then that cannot exist anymore. And when you start melting, the boundaries disappear. In love, the boundaries disappear. In joy, also, the boundaries disappear. Okay? If our pain is particularly deep, we might try to hide our wounds even from ourselves. And this can make us frozen in some sense. Because deep down we are afraid that one small break in the ice will free all the hurt. The rainbow-colored tears on this person's face hold the key to breaking out of isolation. The tears and only the tears have the power to melt the ice. The tears help us to let go of pain, to be gentle with ourselves, and to heal. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, Salim, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope you've enjoyed the session.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
And I hope we'll have you back sometime soon, too.
Anytime, I'll come.
All right. Well, take care, everybody, and bye for now.
Icon Radio, your number one entertainment plug.